Okay, so in this lecture, I want to briefly introduce some different definitions of acid and base types. And at sometimes all three definitions apply. In other scenarios, only one or two may be accurately representative of the acid or base. So first we have the Bronsted definition. And Bronsted says that an acid is going to be a proton donor, and that proton will be accepted by an atom that is basic. A Bronsted base is known as a proton acceptor. So if these acids and bases are reacting in the context of aqueous solution, then we can apply the Arrhenius definition. This is specific to water. So in water, an acid donates a proton, and that proton is accepted by the water molecule, forming hydronium. So an Arrhenius acid produces hydronium in aqueous solution. And conversely, an Arrhenius base is going to act as a proton acceptor and take a proton from water, and that's going to produce hydroxide in aqueous solution.